Hello, vinyl community. This is Mike from TCAT's Deep Vinyl Tracks. Today I'm going to put on my next installment of King Crimson albums. And I know it's been a while since the last one, but hopefully get back into the habit of doing these again. This time, this is part 5 of the series. So we're on the 5th album in the lineup of studio albums by King Crimson. So as we knew in the last episode, Fripp decided to part ways with Mel Collins, Boz Burrell, and Ian Wallace. Now, Mel Collins was actually asked to stay, but he declined. Felt like he wanted to move on and do work with other artists, which he did. And if you look on any album or any song that has a saxophone on it, pretty good chance that Mel Collins had something to do with it. So he definitely had was able to work with a lot of artists, and he did eventually come back to work with King Crimson, both as a guest and as a regular member. So we haven't seen the last of him. We also know that, as I mentioned before in the last video in this series, Peter Sinfield had also quit a year prior to this. So they no longer had a lyricist. Peter Sinfield basically wrote all the lyrics for everything up to that point. So the reason why Robert Fripp decided to do this, it wasn't because band members were leaving, but he decided that artistic differences between him and the rest of the band caused the actual breakup, and he felt that he needed new people, different people to go in the direction he wanted to go in. He was becoming more and more interested in being a composer and also in improvisation. So that was his artistic and personal decision to do this. So that was why he decided to go ahead with the reformation of the band. He was writing a starker style of music. He was saying that he was being inspired by Bela Bartok, the classical composer, and like I said, he wanted to do more free improvisation. So he goes to John Wetton. John Wetton is a person that he had considered bringing on before, but at the time John Wetton was busy with the band Family. John Wetton was also with Uriah Heep and was with them for 2 albums as their bass player. And so Fripp asked John Wetton again to be their bass player, and this time he accepted, not just the bass player but also the lead singer. Another person by the name of Jamie Muir was also recruited, and he had a lot of experience in free improvisation and was a percussionist, not necessarily a drummer, but a percussionist, and he had a lot of different things, a lot of different instruments and toys, if you will, that he could bring into the band, and his improvisational skills. With Jamie Muir came another member, somebody that he recruited into the band, and that was Bill Bruford. Bill Bruford previously was with the band Yes, of course, and he would go back to them again later. But he felt that at the time his time with Yes was over, and he always admired King Crimson, so of course he jumped at the chance. Also, since Mel Collins wasn't coming back, Fripp wanted to keep that other aspect of the band in there. So he brought in David Cross, and David Cross was brought in to play violin, keyboards, and an occasional flute. So basically your new lineup comes down to Robert Fripp on electric and acoustic guitars, mellotron and an electric piano, John Wetton on bass, vocals, and also some piano, Bill Bruford on drums and percussion, Jamie Muir on percussion and drums secondly, David Cross on violin, viola, mellotron, keyboards, and flute, and Richard Palmer James was going to be their new lyricist. Now, Richard Palmer James was one of the founding members of Supertramp. He was with the first incarnation of the band, and he, even though he wasn't a working, I guess, member of the group, they considered him the lyricist, and all of his contributions came through the mail. So he would write the lyrics. He wouldn't have any input as far as how the music sounded, but he would send the lyrics in through the mail, and that's what they would use. So the band went back out on tour and started to receive a lot of attention from the press and from the critics because of their turn to improvisation, their new improvisational style. They started touring again in October of 1972, and another thing that brought them a lot of exposure was Jamie Muir. He had was quite an eccentric presence on a stage, jumping around, making moves that King Crimson had never seen before. Just really quite a personality. He used blood capsules to make it look like he was bleeding from his mouth or somewhere else, or from his head. Muir was also the person that would give the next album its name. Reportedly, the conversation went something like this. Fripp said, "What does this music sound like?" The new music that they were trying out and everything. And Muir said, "Why, it sounds like Larks Tongues and Aspic. What else?" So, hence the birth of their fifth album, Larks Tongues in Aspic. And my personal third favorite King Crimson album. Love this album. I love the direction they turned to in this. They sounded a lot more decided, in my opinion, throughout this record. And another reason why I like it is its heavier sound. So I really love this album. It also introduces a lot of different new styles to King Crimson and the band. So, Bill Bruford also said regarding Jamie Muir that he was a very long-lasting influence on him. He said he wasn't into showing off part of it as much, but more into the musical color, tone, and his intuition. So that had an influence on Bill Bruford's later style. So we have Larks Tongues and Aspic, and quite a different direction. People back then could see an obvious change in their sound. Maybe not so much in the first track, which the first track is called, one of the title tracks. It's called Larks Tongues and Aspic Part 1. And it is 13 minutes and 36 seconds. This particular track is credited to all the band members except for Richard Palmer James, who of course was the lyricist, and this first track is instrumental. Larks Tongues and Aspic Part 1 is the first part of a continuing suite of songs that would continue through several different albums and would end up having a total of 5 parts. Part 1 is quite an eclectic track. There's many shifting moods throughout the track itself, and there's an excellent use of dynamics, going from calm passages to very loud, almost verging on heavy metal passages. And it's led more by the violin, by David Cross's violin. So the violin kind of handles the softer parts and the parts where the volume tends to build, where the guitar seems to head over the louder parts. And this was all glued together by a showcase of some wonderful percussive sounds and gadgets. Uh, Again, things that you didn't hear much in King Crimson's music before, but which really stand out and make the track what it is. This part of the suite has a lot more variation in style than what a lot of the later uh, parts of the suite would have. And also, it's more in an improvised style. It was originally conceived as being like the opening song for King Crimson's performances, and the second part was supposed to be the ending song for a concert performance. So that's Larks Tongue and Aspic Part 1, more centered around a classical style than what the later parts would be. Track number 2 is a shorter song called Book of Saturday. It runs 2 minutes and 53 seconds. Um, this track is attributed to Robert Fripp, John Wetton, and Richard Palmer James. So there's lyrics in this particular song. It's a somewhat simple sounding song, but there's a lot more complexity to it than what really appears to be. There's hardly any percussion. Well, there's no percussion, as a matter of fact, through the track. It's just basically guitar and bass and violin, quite minimal. And there's also some frippertronics in there, or a foreshadowing of such, as I don't think Robert Fripp had recorded any frippertronics up to this point. But you can hear where this development of this particular sound was coming from in this track. The lyrics in this track are about a relationship that is a bit unpredictable. The singer yearns for a better relationship with the person, with their lover, and something along the way happens in the relationship, but that by the end, the lyrics turn a little more hopeful. So.
If I only could deceive you, forgetting the game. Every time I try to leave you, you laugh just the same. 'Cause my wheels never touch the road, and the jumble of lies retold just returns to my back to weigh me down. We lay cards upon the table.
Track number three is a track called Exiles, and it goes back to the long form, which is what the rest of the album is. Exiles is 7 minutes and 40 seconds, and it's credited to David Cross, Robert Fripp, and Richard Palmer Jones. So it starts off with these strange and eerie sounds, very soft, and then it builds as it goes on. Low strings eventually come in with some atmospheric passages. Percussion helps build that atmosphere. And then eventually a violin-led melody kicks in. So it goes from kind of that meandering improvisational to more of a structured melody. There's beautiful melody, a beautiful vocal melody is done by John Wetton. The lyrics are quite yearning. They reflect someone moving into a major change in their life, being a little insecure and scared about it, but also feeling hopeful at the same time. The violin and the vocals tend to lead through this track. The last section kind of meanders a little bit before the melody comes back to the main theme at the end. Very nice track. The fourth track is more of a chaotic sounding track called Easy Money, and it has a duration of 7 minutes and 54 seconds and is credited to Robert Fripp, John Wetton, and Richard Palmer Jones. It's more of a, like I said, chaotic. It's more piecemeal than what the others were, in the fact that this one, Fripp wrote the verses and John Wetton wrote the chorus as far as the melody. Lyrics seem to deal with a high society individual. The lyrics are very sarcastic. They talk about the individual and their fake lifestyle, and how there's really not a lot of substance to that particular person. Whether they were actually talking about a specific individual or not is under question, but the song does have that farcical and sarcastic feel to it. Throughout, it has a heavy marching tempo. John Wetton's vocal delivery almost seems lighthearted, matching or contrasting the darker feel of the music. It's led by a repeating guitar lift, and there are sudden uses of dynamics throughout, which is something they used a lot before this, but it seems to stick out a lot more now. The music has a lot of extreme mood swings through it, and there's some very cool percussive effects, almost funny effects in some places. There is a very tricky rhythmic change that happens in between each one of the verses too, that kind of throw it off of being a typical run-of-the-mill, straight-ahead rock song, by giving it a little more of a progressive feel. And there's a very cool instrumental section, kind of a long middle section, but it's very nice as the band plays together. Just really, you can see how the band really gel together on that part of the track.
Take the money home, sit around the family throne. My old dog could use bone. For 2 weeks we could appease the Almighty. Easy money.
The last two tracks are both instrumental. Track number 5 is called The Talking Drum, and it's 7 minutes and 26 seconds. Now, I like to attribute this kind of music, which King Crimson had used in the past, to being responsible for the post-rock movement, in that it's progressive. It's starts really soft and builds all throughout the piece. And of course, a lot of post-rock does the same type of thing. The entire band is credited for this particular song, and like I said, it's all instrumental. Long developmental track that predicts post-rock, and starts very soft, but instead of slow like a lot of post-rock is, this one has very fast percussion. The fast percussion persists throughout. Even though it's very low at first, it builds and builds and builds, and it's really cool what happens. The violin helps to build this, and the beat and the fast moving percussion also push it forward. So it builds in volume and intensity until it finally explodes at the end with some chaotic noise, which passes directly into the sixth track. Which is, of course, Larks Tongues and Aspic Part 2. This track is 7 minutes and 7 seconds, so about 6 minutes shorter than Part 1. Where Part 1 was more of an improvisational, multifaceted track, Part 2 is more direct, centered more around guitar riffs, and the guitar is very heavy in this. So you're starting to see the direction that King Crimson is going to go in and pretty much stay in for the rest of their career. This is more of an indicator of where future movements of the suite would go also, into the heavier guitar-led riffs and rock-based sounds. For the time when it was released, it's actually quite a heavy track, and it's actually a foreshadowing of a heavy and plodding dark metal sound. This is the sound that would inspire progressive metal, and the progressive metal bands like Dream Theater, Tool, Porcupine Tree, Riverside, and Ocean Size. And they'd even inspire a lot of the sound of a lot of grunge bands. It's driven by guitar and bass. This is a track that's very hard to resist. It's one of my favorites of the entire suite, and it always leaves the listener wanting to hear more, and they will get more in following albums. So that makes up the entire album of Larks Tongue and Aspic. There's the track listing. And after doing some touring, Muir, of course, there's always changes between each album. Muir decided to leave, that he didn't like the lifestyle and of a rock star. And so what happened is the band decided to come up with a story that a gong dropped on his foot and he was out of the band for a while until he recovered. I don't think this is what really happened. What happened was Muir wanted to join a monastery, so he actually went out and joined a Scottish Buddhist monastery and left the rock star lifestyle altogether and never came back, as far as I know. But the rest of the band, however, all the members stayed intact and actually went on and released their next album, the next album which would come out in 1974. So that pretty much covers everything for Larks Tongue and Aspic. It's nice that the band didn't change very much after this, but stayed pretty much together and would continue for the album after that too. So finally, it seemed like King Crimson was starting to get a cemented bunch of people, a cemented group, instead of all these changes, which was good because this lineup really worked well together, and you can tell that in the music. So hopefully soon we'll be seeing the next installment. The next album is called Starless and Bible Black. And thank you for watching. Make sure to leave comments, and we will talk to you all later.